It is a co-presentation with Marco van Sterkenburg, the CEO and co-founder with Drillster, and Greg Groce, the managing director with Xprtise. They will be discussing how to make DEI more than a moment by leveraging artificial intelligence to uncover and fix DE&I gaps. So before you guys officially start, I want to tell the group a little bit about you both. So Marco is a visionary when it comes to education and edtech. He is continuously learning himself and is passionate to let other people learn smarter and more effectively and enable them to apply the right knowledge at the right time. A dream world, right, Marco? This is also his mission with Drillster, the edtech company that he co-founded in 2012. And Drillster's motto is learning with you. So Greg is our other co-presenter, and Greg has over 20 years of learning and technology experience and is a recognizable leader in the workflow learning industry and an early adopter of the 5 moment of need methodology. Greg helps organizations and business leaders and L&D professionals to implement, scale, and sustain performance support and adaptive learning solutions with Drillster that allow companies to organize work for a distributed workforce, resulting in measurable business results. I feel like I covered a lot, but it probably didn't even do it justice. I want to officially hand the mic over to both you, Marco and Greg, and let you guys get started.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Charlene. Thank you very much. So let me share my screen with you. I hope it's all visible now. So good afternoon. My name is Marco van Sterkenburg, and like Charlene said, I'm going to co-present today with Greg Groce from Xprtise. But before we're going to look into the details of our presentation, I would like to take a look at today's theme, which is DE&I in the blended workplace: belonging, justice, prosperity, and sustainability. 4 words that are essential for an inclusive, equitable, and diverse organization. But of those 4 words, sustainability often has the least attention. And it's for that reason that we want to focus on the sustainability in DE&I today. Some time ago, we asked our customers the question, what are your toughest challenges in DEI training programs? This was a question that was part of an overall survey. And so they gave us a lot of questions, and I would like to ask the audience the same question today. So can you answer in the chat function of the event platform the question what your toughest challenges are when it comes to DEI training programs? And then in a moment, we'll look at the responses that our customers gave to this, important question. But let's first introduce ourselves. So Greg, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, certainly. Again, my name is Greg Groce, and thanks for taking the time for us today. As Charlene, you did a great job there. I mean, my passion is really working with companies in specific to the workflow learning design. So how can we support users while they work? And how can we bring in technology that reinforces what they've learned in traditional training? Our headquarters here are in Philadelphia. And at the end of the day, we really want to bring context to content. We all know what training is, be it classroom or virtual instructor-led training. Ours is really going to speak about how we can sustain that learning specific to some of your DEI programs.
Okay, and my name is Marco van Sterkenburg, like I said, and working for Drillster. We are a company that makes adaptive learning technology, combining neuroscience with artificial intelligence and big data, basically to make sure that whatever we learn is retained throughout the year, so that every employee has the right knowledge and skills to perform on the job at any given time in the year, throughout the year. So let me talk about the results of the survey that we had with our customers and the challenges that they faced when it comes to DEI training. So the most mentioned item was that they felt that DEI training only had a temporary impact. So people developed knowledge and skills around the training moment. They maybe retained it a couple of days, couple of weeks, but a month later, they seem to have forgotten most of what they learned. And the second point they mentioned is that people could successfully finish a training, but they did not know how to apply it. So it did not lead to behavioral change. So the impact was, again, very limited. And we also heard quite often that participants felt that the training was irrelevant for them. So they maybe felt that they were already behaving in an equitable and inclusive and diverse way, so that the training was maybe more for their colleagues, not really relevant for them. They were already behaving okay. So let's take a look at how that then links back to traditional training programs. So Greg?
Yeah, so all of us on the call right now have been involved in training, and oftentimes it's the best way to learn, be it training or mentoring programs. But oftentimes after training, leaders have anxiety. Have the employees retained it? Do they have the ability to apply it, several weeks down the line when one of those scenarios or dilemmas occur? That's a big question mark sometimes. I think we've all seen the forgetful curve before. This is over 100-year-old study from Ebbinghaus that after formal or virtual instruction, or if I took an e-learning, 80% of what is learned goes away after 1 week. And studies show in the same study that after 3 weeks, less than 7%. So how can we make sure that, hey, we spend a lot of effort, time, money on DEI programs. How can we make sure that the user and student truly understand it? How can they reproduce what was learned? And most importantly, how can they apply it? So that's why the theme here today is, how do you sustain these programs?
Exactly. And so at Drillster, we thought, how can we make learning different? And how can we fight that forgetting curve? How can we make sure that people understand the relevance of what they learn so that they can apply it on the job? This is not only an issue that we face, or that we saw that companies face in DEI-related training programs. It actually applies to lots of training programs, regardless of the theme. So 10 years ago, we founded Drillster, and we combined the technology with the neuroscience and the big data. And this resulted in an application, an adaptive learning application that results in faster learning and better retention. And that may sound a little bit complex. Well, it actually is not. So let me explain you how the Drillster way of learning functions. First of all, we present information in small, manageable pieces, microlearning, because microlearning allows learners to learn in small, regular intervals, and that is much more efficient than cramming for hours and hours. Also, microlearning forces instructional designers to focus on essential elements of a learning topic only. In a microlearning module, there is no room for minor details. And that also makes sure that the right things are anchored in the brain of the participants. Like I said before, just sending a lot of information is not an efficient way of learning, because after having read the information or watched a video, people do not really know if they've correctly understood it, if they can memorize it, reproduce it, and then apply it on the job. So the actual learning has to take place differently. And it takes place through questions, problems, cases, or dilemmas. This is called assessment-based learning. Assessment-based learning forces learners to think about an answer, and it's the efforts they have to make to recall information from memory to come to the right answer that causes a stronger and more durable learning effect. So the effort is key in learning. The stronger the learning, the more the transmission from short-term to long-term memory, so the better information will stick. It will be anchored. Another side effect of assessment-based learning is that we can measure very precisely which elements of a learning course a participant masters already and which elements he or she does not yet master. If we take the example of an unconscious bias training, and if I would use assessment-based learning, then if I would get a lot of mistakes on questions on the right-hand bias, then I would realize that there's a gap on the right-hand bias, whereas my colleague has maybe more difficulties with the age bias, so he or she will get more incorrect questions on that, and that will raise the awareness of the fact that there's a gap. But uncovering a gap is not enough. The gaps have to be fixed, and this is done through the immediate feedback that is given after an answer is submitted. And neuroscience showed here that the quicker feedback is presented after an incorrect answer is given, the more the brain is open to process and store the remedial information. So then the real learning takes place. If that same information would be presented an hour later or a day later, then the brain would no longer process and store it. So the feedback doesn't lead to a learning effect. So the questions uncover the gaps, and then the feedback makes sure that those gaps are fixed. Then there's smart repetition. This is where the artificial intelligence starts playing a role. The Drillster application has a proprietary algorithm that determines the order and frequency of the various questions. So depending on the answering behavior of an individual user on an individual topic, the application will make sure that those elements that are not yet fully mastered will be repeated more frequently. So again, if I would have difficulties with the similarity bias, then I will get more feedback and more repetition on the similarity bias than my colleague who maybe had differences, who made difficulties with other topics. So every participant has a personal course path to proficiency. Also, after a correct answer, feedback is given and there's repetition. And we placed an increasing time interval between each repetition of a question. That's called spaced repetition. And why do we do that? The more time elapses between each repetition, the more the forgetting curve will have done its work. And so the stronger the effort that the learner has to make to recall information from memory. So again, the stronger the learning effect. And then we spoke about the forgetting curve. Well, the forgetting curve here also plays its role. But with Drillster, we've been able to use all the data that we build up in the learning process and to use that to calculate how and when knowledge declines if it is not maintained. And as an organization, you can say, well, if DEI is an important topic, then we will make sure that every employee has at least, for example, 75% proficiency on DEI year-round. And if the Drillster application has calculated for an individual user that the proficiency approaches the 75%, then the user will be notified. He will be brought back to the exercise so he can brush up on the knowledge. And all of a sudden, the one-time training moment has become a continuous process. So your DEI training has become more than a moment. And people will, throughout the year, be recalled back to the exercise to brush up on their DEI knowledge and skills. And when they're taken back, they don't have to retake the whole course, but the application will know what were the weak points last time that someone practiced, and how long has it been that certain elements of the DEI training hasn't been seen, and that is being repeated first. And then there is, like we said, people can perfectly master the theoretical parts of a DEI training, but it doesn't mean that they know how to apply that in the context of their daily work, so at the workplace. And that is what we call the say-do gap. You can perfectly understand the material, but you don't know how to apply it. And that is solved by applying the same mechanism on dilemmas, scenarios, and cases that are very close to the real life. And here we advise our customers to really customize the type of scenarios and dilemmas that are used. Because if you're working in an office environment, you face different dilemmas and scenarios than if you are, for example, on the road visiting customers or when you're working in a factory. So the more relevant and the more and the closer the scenarios are to the workplace of an individual user, the more they will be engaged and the more they will recognize that this is a situation that they could face tomorrow while they're at work. And if the brain has already gone through a specific situation and people have already gone through, okay, what is the best behavior in a specific situation, then if such a situation happens in real life, the brain will recognize it. And as a reflex, the participant will basically show the right behavior. And this process can also be shown with the 4 stages of competence of Maslow. If in phase 1 at the left side, if people think that they already behave in a diverse and inclusive way, they're maybe unconsciously incompetent. And by answering questions and making or giving incorrect answers, they become aware of their incompetence. They're in phase 2. Then the feedback will fix the gaps. And if there's a control question and they answer that question correctly, they will be conscious about the competence that they now have, but they still have to think about it. And when throughout time there will be some repetitions, then basically they have to think less about the exact answer. So then the situations and knowing how to act in the situations will become a reflex. And that is actually what you want. Then behavioral change really has taken place. Over to you, Greg.
Yeah, I know analytics is important to probably everyone on the phone, in terms of are our programs making an impact? So analytics is a big part of the Drillster platform. It not only shows the individual where they are at, meaning how proficient they are in a certain topic or course, but it also provides the ability for a business line leader or even the DEI leader himself or herself to see that the actual program real time. And what does that do? One, you can see that the information is getting to a proficiency level where you're hoping that it is leading to behavioral change, that it's addressing some of the KPIs and the business impact measures that are important to your company. Secondly, which I think is very important, because Drillster has a number of reports that come with the platform, you can surface ways where you might need a training program. You might need to pull certain people out, have a town hall, be a webinar where it's very structured, it's collaborative, people ideate, just like some of the sessions before me. It gives people a voice, and it also gives leadership a more targeted view of what they can pinpoint that's most important to the company. It also allows you, if you think of your mentors, I know that's a big part of many of these programs, but oftentimes not scalable for everyone. It gives you the ability where you can really focus on how can my mentors really make an impact on the people that they are serving. So the analytics, be it standalone or integrated into some of your already existing platforms, is very important part of the component of really justifying the ROI and the behavioral change that the Drillster platform is trying to provide your company. So in closing, or what we say more than a moment, the AI and adaptive learning to uncover and fix DEI gaps, we're really hoping that you were able to see how we provide a different component to this. We're not focused on the training aspect, but really the sustainment aspect of it. As you can see, that's where many people are. That's where we are in the workflow, as I say, versus we're in training moments. So keeping those users supported throughout is what's very relevant to us. And it's just not a knowledge-driven experience. We want to surface scenarios, dilemmas, cases where the user, when they're taking the Drillster platform, can really utilize the solution in not just a knowledge-based way, but often in many different scenarios. So it really bridges that say-do gap that Marco talked about. The retention piece, if you think about spaced repetition, AI, and algorithm, that's what's most important, is reinforcing where each of us is lacking or needs improvement on. So it provides that personalized experience where everyone on this call is going to do well in certain areas, but we all need to brush up on certain elements so we can realize that behavioral change. So that's what's very important about the algorithm. It's going to reinforce via spaced repetition when I, as a user, is going to brush up on my knowledge. Flexibility, so easy to create your own content or leverage existing content. So we often engage with customers that already have content or need to quickly stand up a DEI program. So think of our technology as an enabler of all your good content that you already have. We do have the instructional designers that can help with good drill design and the equivalents that come with that. But we want to, when you want to think of Drillster, we want to get these programs up and running in a very seamless way. Also think about change. I know, again, just listening to a couple of the previous sessions, with this type of content, things could change daily. There could be, unfortunately, a big theme that's impacting us just next week. With Drillster, you can create this, assessment-driven learning in a very rapid manner, and you can disperse that to the enterprise and then get that feedback and that proficiency level achieved in a very quick manner. So it does give you the ability to get things out quick, nimble, and again, expose areas where maybe we do need a town hall on this, or I need to create a quick e-learning where I can supplement or complement what Drillster's providing. And as I mentioned, we're all about the methodology, getting you up to speed in terms of how you would do the drill design and then sustain it. It all comes down to capacity and capability. So, by and large, we want you to own your DEI programs and utilize the Drillster platform without us, but we can always be your trusted advisor too. So with that, Charlene, I think that ends our session, and we'd love to answer some questions that some of the audience might have for us.
Perfect. So I will pop back in. Thank you both. Someone did submit a question here. And this is an interesting one, how do you address bias in AI?
Yeah. Well, like we said, where it comes to is if you master certain elements or not. So basically, it's not that the artificial intelligence is overtaking, let's say, how we can think and act as a human. No, what it does is measuring if you have the right knowledge on the one hand, and if you apply that knowledge in the right way in specific situations. And the algorithm learns with the responses that are given, give feedback if it's not the desired, let's say, behavior that is shown, and then make sure that there is, let's say, repeat situations or scenarios presented later on to see if people have learned from their mistakes and if the right behavior is now anchored. That's basically how that works, let's say, from an artificial intelligence point of view.
And this is another question as well, how has the need for artificial intelligence, specifically tying back to DE&I, how has that increased as of late? And why is that so important?
Yeah. Well, actually, we saw in many industries already 10 years ago that people invested a lot in training, but let's say a couple of months later, when they needed what they learned to apply on the job, they had forgotten most of that. And that sometimes led to quite difficult situations. We saw that in the airline industry. So if a pilot hasn't, top of mind knowledge on procedures to land a plane in case of an emergency situation, then the impact can be quite fatal. So we saw that when it comes to crucial knowledge and skills, and I think DAI, you can mention that also, quite a crucial element to have year round, not only at the moment of training. So we saw that our customers, they went from topics like safety, hygiene, integrity to more, let's say, DEA related themes, because they saw at the end it's also something you have to be aware of year round, and only if there is this awareness year round, you can really make sure that you behave in the right way to create an inclusive, diverse, and equitable organization.
Yeah, and to add to that also, we also saw, especially at the leadership level, if you think of leadership and wellness as titles too, we saw DE&I being part of that overall theme. And because I believe one of the earlier panelists, he was talking about how critical it was to understand leadership and how it aligns with the strategy of the company. Well, we believe that those three components really lend themselves to an overarching theme that Drillster is, that AI component really, again, how do we ensure that they can act on it, they apply it, the behavioral changes there.
I'm selfishly taking notes myself, and I hope everyone is as well. Couple more questions here that we can fit in with our time is, with Marco, with what you were showing earlier, we could imagine that participants may mistake what they're participating in as kind of like a test, right? So how do your customers kind of deal with this, and what is that experience like?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because we use assessment-based learning techniques that could easily be mistaken for a test or an exam. And basically, communication is key. So people need to understand that this is quite a safe tool, that they're not punished for giving incorrect answers, but actually the questions help them to learn faster and more efficient and in a personalized way. So if they're communicated the very first time that they use our methodology and our application, if there's a little communication campaign around it, informing them of how it functions, then they're fine, because what happens is everybody can reach full proficiency. It's only that someone who has difficulties with a specific theme will get more repetition and feedback, and then someone who's quite good at the theme and will have less questions and less repetition to prove that he or she is okay on the topic. So everybody can, at the end, and that's the objective, can be at the same level, but the path to that level, to that full proficiency, is different. And communication it makes a lot of difference with regard to the engagement, how people will use this on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think it's important. People don't want to feel like they put the wrong answer. There's no wrong answer, right? That's what we have to emphasize, is that there's no wrong answer. You just have to answer honestly and truthfully so that you can uncover that information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? I think human nature is that we don't want to be wrong, but I think that's an important note to really drive it forward.
Yeah, and what else is nice about it, and this just speaks to any topic you might introduce, when you get that immediate feedback, even if you got it wrong or right, so you're learning, even if you get it wrong, versus typically with a test, you just go on to the next question. We typically know if we got it right or wrong. This is going to tell you, hey, this is why you got it wrong, and this is what you need to consider. The algorithm on the back end is going to say, well, Charlene, she needs to brush up here. That's where the equivalent questions come in, which are so powerful. It's not going to be the same question. It might not even be a knowledge-based question. It could be a scenario that's a quick video that they'll take, and hopefully they'll get it right the next time, and that might happen a week from now. That's what's nice, that the AI, the algorithm, it automates the process, and then hopefully the DEI leader can find areas where, hey, I truly need to do something here, or why do these pocket of people, why is this difficult for them? Or you'll get some pleasant surprises too, but use the analytics as a way to really get in front of everything.
Another question here is given who you've worked with thus far and whatnot, like what are some of the interesting gaps that are being uncovered through this methodology, and what are, as it pertains to DE&I, like what are you guys hearing? What is it kind of showing?
Yeah, well, if you look at DEI, then, well, unconscious bias is of course very important, but understanding also the basic concepts of the foundations of DE&I, the application process, and this is what we with the corporate customers we work. What I like a lot is if they work with us and with our instructional designers to really get the best scenarios and dilemmas out of the organization itself, so that it's not, let's say, driven by learning and development or by the DEI team, but that every employee in the organization is working together to make sure that all the issues or the incidents or that have situations that have been there in the past are used for learning purposes, and that those scenarios are then realistic. And so like I said, the uncovering of gaps can be anything. And I think the charm of this situation is that you immediately fix them. So at the end, in the same flow, you uncover and fix it. So when a course has been finished, there are no gaps anymore. And I think that's the charm of a solution like this.
I absolutely. So I think we have time for another question here. That's something that just popped up. Which is the use of your application always standalone, or can it also be integrated in a learning management system or learning portal?
Yeah, well, it's exactly that. So we have a standalone web application and mobile application, but as we work for a lot of corporate organizations, there's also the possibility to include it in or integrate it in the learning management system or learning portal or intranet. So that it's a seamless part of an overall course. And maybe also good to mention, like Greg said before, it can also very good be used with other DEI interventions that an organization already have. So if there's classroom training or webinars or other campaigns that are run throughout the year, then this can basically the heartbeat, making sure that everything that's learned and all the subjects that they pay attention to is being reinforced and retained, so that everybody, the impact also of other programs is larger.
Yeah, it's typically used in the beginning sometimes, Charlene, where you're creating that baseline. I'm a seasoned employee, you're somewhat new. Marco just switched from an industry. Let's get everyone to a baseline so when they do go into that town hall or that classroom, that at least everyone has a sense or a baseline of the knowledge that the training program wants to teach. And then this whole sustainment angle. What do we do after they leave?
Mhm.
Right? Because a lot that's from my perspective, when I looked at this a year ago, I truthfully didn't think I would be at one of your events talking about DE&I, but the whole sustainment piece of it and what Drillster provides really is just open doors where, hey, can we apply that? This is more with our existing companies saying that we work with, can we tackle this with Drillster with instead of just doing compliance driven training, for example.
Well, and I think everyone right now wants to know what is that starting line for each of us. We all, it's different for everyone. Everyone has a different spot. So if people, it's good to know where is that for me as an individual, for people on my team, what does that look like? And then more importantly, how are we going to grow and how are we going to improve if we don't understand that about, where we stand and where we are. And so that all boils down and ties all back into everything that we're talking about today. And absolutely unconscious bias has been polling and coming up as a top concern for our people that are attending this session. And I think that it's good to hear about what those opportunities look like. I believe we're at time. So, of course, it's my job to get ready for our next session and whatnot. But what I will do is thank you guys both. I'm going to make some quick announcements. And for the audience, we're going to take a quick break before we start with our next keynote. So thank you so much, Greg. Thank you so much, Marco. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything.
Of course.